Caitlin Clark has made the team. Shocker, I know. The real question is, are the coaches going to have the guts to do what's right and make her the starting point guard? Are the coaches going to have the guts and do what's right to make her the starting point guard?
Mitchell, be mad at me. I don't care. Alyssa Thomas didn't make the team either. Oh, shit. I know who I would remove for Alyssa Thomas. I'm not telling you. Y'all not attacking me.
World Cup.
Now, when it comes to the ATL Barbie Angel Reese, I just want to wake this up because there were so many people, so many haters who said that, yeah, Angel's just going to be a model. She's just going to do her brand thing. She's not going to take the league serious. And not only is she taking the league seriously, she was selected for Team USA to represent the country in the World Cup. And if that is not a testament that you can do it all and don't let not a single soul on this planet box you in, I don't know what else can do that for you.
Caitlin Clark is officially on Team USA, and this time there is no uncertainty attached to it. She is not showing up as a camp body, she is not waiting around for one more round of cuts, and she is not sitting on the edge of the roster hoping her name survives. She has a confirmed spot, and from everything being discussed right now, the expectation goes far beyond simply having her wear the uniform. Clark is being talked about as the point guard who could control the entire operation, the player who sets the pace, organizes the offense, and potentially even wears the captain's title. In other words, this could be the summer where Team USA puts the ball in her hands and asks her to run the show. You would assume news like that would create almost universal excitement around women's basketball, especially considering how much attention she brings wherever she goes. Instead, the announcement immediately turned into another cultural argument, and within minutes, the basketball internet split directly down the middle. One reaction in particular started circulating almost instantly, and it perfectly captured how strange this conversation has become. The message essentially argued that Clark should not have been selected because of the behavior of some of her most obsessive supporters. The writer claimed that if Clark does not receive the playing time, touches, or scoring chances those fans believe she deserves, they will attack the coaching staff and teammates both online and in person, invent narratives, create chaos, and turn the environment toxic for everyone around her. And this wasn't some anonymous account with a handful of followers desperately fishing for attention. This was a viewpoint being openly expressed by people who apparently follow the league closely enough to discuss national team roster decisions seriously. But the most revealing part was not simply that one person believed it. It was how quickly thousands of people seemed ready to embrace the same argument, turning it into one of the loudest reactions surrounding Clark's selection almost as soon as the roster became public.
I don't know if these stats is true or not, and honestly, I ain't watched enough of the W this year to really get into the Caitlin Clark banter, but I will say this. There are a lot of great hoopers in the league, and Caitlin Clark is indeed a great hooper. I seen somebody in the comments say, y'all just hate her because she white. That's false. I personally dislike Caitlin because she reminds me of all the white women that I don't like. The women that be like, they'll run up to somebody and damn near smack you to try to get their way, and then point your direction and point the cops right to you and be like, he pushed me.
No, ma'am. I was standing here first. And that is exactly why the backlash is so difficult to understand from a basketball perspective. This is not one of those roster debates where a player gets selected despite mediocre production and everyone is left wondering whether reputation carried more weight than performance. There is no need to twist the statistics, search for some obscure advanced metric, or make a complicated argument to explain why Clark belongs. She led the league in assists. She has already established herself as one of the most powerful attendants and television draws women's basketball has ever seen, and there is a legitimate case that nobody in the sport currently moves attention the way she does. Beyond the popularity, she has also spent 2 professional seasons demonstrating that she can take control of games, manipulate defenses, create opportunities for teammates, and elevate an offense when the ball is placed in her hands. The basketball resume is there, the commercial impact is undeniable, and the developmental trajectory has been obvious. Yet somehow, instead of the conversation centering on how dangerous this Team USA roster could become with Clark running point, a noticeable portion of the reaction sounds almost like disappointment. People are responding as though something has been taken away from them rather than added to the national team. And when a player with that combination of production, visibility, and playmaking earns a roster spot and the immediate reaction is grief instead of excitement, it tells you this debate is operating on something much deeper than whether she can actually play.
Just with the World Cup roster being announced this morning, what does it mean to you to be on that roster for the first time?
Yeah, obviously really exciting. Anytime you wear USA across your chest, it's a tremendous honor, and to be surrounded by so many great players, some of which have already won Olympic gold medals, some have been on the World Cup team before, and obviously I get to share it with AB too, so it's pretty cool and pretty fun, and I'm excited about it. Obviously, I got a ways to go to get there. August is a really, really busy month. It's a big month for us. It's a challenging month. We play a lot of really good teams. So, take it one day at a time, but just a big honor, and I'm really excited.
So let's confront the question that people keep dancing around instead of answering directly. Are certain WNBA fans, and maybe even some voices within the media ecosystem around the league, genuinely bothered that one of the best available point guards in the country has been selected to represent Team USA? Because once all of the side arguments are removed, that is what this controversy starts looking like. People keep calling it a conversation about toxicity, but that explanation only goes so far. They keep bringing up fan behavior as though that somehow determines whether a player deserves national team minutes. But that does not explain the intensity of the reaction either. At the center of all of this is a much simpler reality. Caitlin Clark could enter this tournament as the guard directing the offense, commanding the basketball, initiating possessions, and becoming one of the central faces of Team USA. For some people, apparently that possibility itself is uncomfortable. It means the player who arrived in the league surrounded by unprecedented hype could suddenly be placed at the center of the country's most important basketball stage. It means former MVPs, champions, established veterans, and long-standing stars may find themselves playing alongside someone who becomes the biggest story almost immediately. And rather than judging whether that arrangement gives the United States the best chance to win, certain corners of the conversation seem more interested in arguing that Clark's presence creates too much noise. But noise does not determine basketball value. If the best basketball option happens to produce the most attention as well, that is not a reason to reject it. It is simply the reality of having a transcendent attraction enter the sport.
Caitlin, girl, what are you doing? Who told you you could go 1v1 with A'ja Wilson? I want to know. I used to say I want to move through the world like a mediocre white man because their confidence is through the roof, no matter what. I want this confidence. I want to know what it is because that was A'ja Wilson and it did not end well. And then she said, "Ooh, we in Gainbridge. They gonna call this flop," but they didn't. Girl, ain't nobody touch you.
Now look at Team USA without Clark, because that is where this discussion should have begun before anyone started arguing about social media behavior. You still have A'ja Wilson, who remains one of the most dominant and complete players anywhere in women's basketball. She is a multiple-time MVP, an elite scorer, a defensive anchor, and the type of superstar around whom championship teams can be built on both ends of the floor. Nobody needs to diminish Wilson to make the case for Clark. But once you move beyond A'ja, the level of mainstream star power on this roster changes dramatically. That does not mean the remaining players are not excellent. Team USA is loaded with experienced professionals, champions, elite defenders, high-level scorers, and players who understand exactly what winning international basketball requires. The roster has depth and pedigree everywhere. What it does not necessarily possess without Clark is another player who can independently transform the amount of public attention surrounding the event. There are very few athletes in women's basketball whose name alone can change ticket demand before the opening tip. Clark is one of them, and right now she may be the strongest example. She is the player capable of bringing casual viewers into an event they otherwise might never watch. She reaches people who do not follow every WNBA standings update, who may not know every player on the national roster, and who might never have watched an entire women's professional game before her arrival. That matters because international basketball is not only about putting talented players on the floor, it is also about expanding the audience, turning major tournaments into cultural events, and giving new viewers a reason to care. Clark does that immediately, which makes the idea that Team USA somehow loses something by including her increasingly difficult to defend.
Caitlin Clark should be the logo of the WNBA and the NBA. After the 2024-25 NBA season, people were complaining that the ratings were collapsing. The storyline of Caitlin Clark versus Angel Reese was better than anything that the NBA had produced in years, so everybody watched the WNBA. Caitlin Clark pulled everybody back into watching basketball. The following year in 2025 and 2026, the NBA had double the viewership in the NBA Finals because people are now buying storylines again. The same way that people wanted to see Angel Reese versus Caitlin Clark, people want to see Victor Wembanyama versus the New York Knicks. Caitlin Clark saved the NBA's viewership. So what Caitlin Clark did for basketball is bigger than just women's college basketball and the WNBA. Caitlin Clark should be the logo of the NBA because nobody would be watching the NBA at all if it weren't for Caitlin Clark.
And none of that is vague marketing language. The impact can be seen in actual attendance, ticket demand, broadcast interest, and the size of the crowds that follow Clark from city to city. Over the last 2 seasons, arenas hosting her games have repeatedly experienced dramatic increases in attendance compared with what those same buildings often attracted before she arrived. In certain markets, demand has doubled or even tripled simply because Clark was coming to town. Teams have moved games into larger venues, ticket prices have changed, television windows have shifted, and regular season matchups that might once have been treated as ordinary suddenly became national events. Now take that effect and attach it to a major international tournament, potentially even an Olympic stage where the global audience is already significantly larger than anything available during a normal road game. Without Clark, Team USA would still draw strong basketball crowds. Loyal fans would attend, longtime supporters of women's basketball would watch, and the national team brand would still carry enormous prestige. With Clark involved, however, the ceiling becomes completely different. Suddenly you are talking about potential sellouts, major streaming numbers, enormous social media engagement, increased merchandise interest, and millions of casual viewers who may tune in specifically because they recognize her name. Those are the exact viewers women's basketball has spent years trying to convert into regular fans. So when somebody claims Team USA would somehow be better off excluding Clark, the natural question is simple: better in what way? It certainly would not become more commercially attractive. It would not become more visible. It would not create more mainstream coverage. And considering what she produces as a passer and offensive organizer, there is no convincing case that it would automatically become a stronger basketball team either.
Are the coaches going to have the guts to do what's right and make her the starting point guard? Are the coaches going to have the guts and do what's right to make her the starting point guard? I don't agree with it, but I can at least see the argument during qualifiers, right? Okay, she missed a whole season. She's coming back from injury. We haven't seen her play for a while. All right, we'll start with Chelsea Gray, and then Caitlin Clark will come in and be the backup. I don't agree with it, but I can at least see the argument, right? I can try to see the reasoning. But going into the actual World Cup itself, in the middle of the WNBA season, while Caitlin Clark is absolutely destroying the league, while Caitlin Clark is clearly the best point guard in the league, and with no Olivia Miles for them to agenda themselves into putting as the starting point guard over her, there's absolutely no way that Caitlin Clark doesn't start, right?
This is where the conversation becomes especially revealing. Because beneath all the surface-level arguments, this does not really seem to be about basketball evaluation. Nobody making a serious film-based case is studying Clark's passing, court vision, offensive gravity, assist production, transition creation, deep shooting range, and overall impact, then logically arriving at the conclusion that Team USA becomes worse simply because she is included. You can debate lineup combinations. You can discuss defensive matchups. You can argue about how many minutes she should play or whether another veteran fits a particular opponent better. Those are legitimate basketball conversations. But the claim that the team itself is harmed by having Clark available is much harder to defend. What seems to be happening instead is that basketball language is being used to disguise discomfort with what Clark represents. She remains relatively new to the senior international environment, yet she can walk into that locker room and instantly become the most discussed player on the roster. She could generate more headlines than former league MVPs. She could receive more mainstream coverage than athletes who already own multiple championships. She could become the face shown on promotional graphics despite sharing the floor with players who have carried USA basketball for years. For people who believe attention should follow seniority, that creates tension. For fans deeply invested in established hierarchies, seeing Clark become the center of the spectacle so quickly can feel unfair even when the basketball decision makes complete sense. But national teams are not supposed to be built around protecting emotional hierarchies. They are supposed to be built around winning games with the strongest combination of talent available. If Clark has earned the opportunity, then the fact that her popularity makes some people uncomfortable is not a legitimate reason to keep her away from it.
Not putting Caitlin Clark on the U.S. women's basketball team is one of the biggest failures of basic business that I can remember ever seeing in the modern world of sports. Over the weekend, Caitlin Clark sold out Washington, D.C.'s arena. Over 20,000 people showed up. They're all showing up for Caitlin Clark. WNBA viewership, it all is coming basically from Caitlin Clark. She would triple the overall ratings for these games by herself, and due to her popularity, she would make others popular who were playing alongside of her. With the WNBA and women's basketball begging for attention for decades, they have gotten an opportunity, the likes of which we haven't seen. Caitlin Clark is a comet streaking across the night sky, and instead of embracing her star power, you know what they've done? They have decided they would rather be a tiny league that is getting a fraction of the attention it otherwise should be.
And there is history behind why this moment matters so much. Clark has already lived through the opposite version of this story. During her rookie season, she was left off the national team roster even while putting together stretches of basketball that made people question whether several guards chosen ahead of her were actually providing more value. At the time, the explanations centered on experience, chemistry, continuity, and the idea that the national program already had a veteran group it trusted. You could understand that reasoning if you were determined to give the selection committee the benefit of the doubt. Clark had only recently entered the professional game. The roster had established relationships, and international tournaments are not always the place coaches want to experiment. But in hindsight, the choice created a conversation that followed the team through the entire competition. The tournament still produced respectable ratings and interest, but the lingering question remained impossible to avoid. How much larger could the event have been if the most talked about young player in basketball had been included? That story sat behind broadcasts, social media discussions, and coverage throughout the tournament. This time, there is no need to ask the hypothetical. Clark has the opportunity she did not receive before, and the circumstances have changed dramatically. She is no longer a rookie being included as a possible marketing bonus. She has professional evidence behind her. She has league-leading production as a facilitator. She has experienced defenses designed specifically to slow her down. Now she can enter Team USA as someone expected to control possessions rather than simply observe from the bench. If the coaching staff truly builds significant portions of the offense around her, the narrative becomes one of the clearest redemption arcs available in modern women's basketball. She was left out the first time. Now she returns with more experience, stronger numbers, and the possibility of becoming one of the central figures on the team. Basketball fans should want to see how that story plays out regardless of which player they personally support.
Through the heart of the WNBA season, Caitlin Clark has been really finding her groove. Last night, she notched her first triple-double of the season. Nice win on the road against Portland. She made a couple really high-difficulty shots, got to the free-throw line a ton. But as usual, what impressed me most was her vision with the ball in her hand. Check out this play. The Fever love to run her off-ball screens. Here she has sort of a double screen so she can decide to go left or... The key here is keeping her eyes up. They are hard hedging that screen with the bit, and meanwhile, Mo Billings is slashing to the basket. She has to be able to throw it over the top, find her hand, and set her up for the basket. Same thing here without the screen. She and Kelsey Mitchell are reading the defense. As soon as the big locks eyes with Caitlin, Mitchell's cutting back door. Clark has to keep her eyes up to see that and make the bounce pass. Great ball handlers keep their eyes up. They love to set her up with this high screen so she can just dump that ball to space and then make the read. Helps a lot when you have Aaliyah Boston on your team. She can go get a bucket pretty much whenever she wants it.
Because when you actually study what Clark can do while controlling an offense, the possibilities alongside this roster become obvious. Her greatest strength is not simply that she can score from well beyond the three-point line. It is what that shooting threat does to every defender around her. Opponents have to pick her up earlier than they would most guards, which stretches defensive spacing, pulls help defenders away from the paint, and creates passing windows that might not exist against a conventional point guard. Clark also sees actions developing before many defenders realize where the possession is going. She can fire passes through narrow windows, hit cutters in stride, attack in transition, and force weak side defenders to make decisions they do not want to make. Over a substantial professional sample, she has shown that her production is not simply empty volume. Players around her benefit because the defense is constantly reacting to where she is and what she might attempt next. Now imagine placing that skill set next to Aja Wilson. Wilson demands enormous attention inside because there are very few defenders in the world capable of containing her one-on-one. If defenses collapse toward the paint, Clark has space outside. If defenders pressure Clark high above the arc, Wilson suddenly has additional room to work inside or operate in screening actions. If opponents trap Clark, she has one of the most devastating interior finishers in basketball waiting behind the pressure. That is not some outrageous fan theory. It is basic offensive construction. Elite coaches spend their careers trying to place players with complementary pressure points next to one another, and a Clark-Wilson pairing could force defenses to choose between two completely different kinds of danger on every possession.
If I was on the committee, I would have put her on the team. I was surprised. I think that we are having two different conversations. If you are talking about who should be on the roster based off of who makes the best team and who is the best to represent the United States of America as the U.S. Women's Olympic basketball team, that is a separate conversation from what would be the best for growing the sport. I am with all of you. The attention that the sport is getting is because of Caitlin Clark. She is bringing eyeballs, she is bringing sponsors, she is putting people in the seats, she is causing all of this conversation. She is. So from a growing the sport perspective, from a marketing perspective, from a business perspective, I completely agree. You can't argue the numbers. But from a basketball perspective, you can't. And what is conflicting for me, as a female athlete myself, when do we talk about the sport and not just the novelty and the drama and the eyeballs and the ratings and the division and the politics and the race. And all of those things are great for these shows. And all these things are great for social media. And all these things are great for the national debate around Caitlin Clark, which is fueling a lot of what's happening here. So I'm with it. Like, I've been doing this a long time. This is an entertainment business. I am aware of that. And that's why we get into it about who's going to be the face all the time. I'm like, yeah, this is a great player, but do they have polarity? Do they have spice? Do they have tension? Do they bring something to the table that makes you feel?
There is another detail that repeatedly gets buried underneath the loudest fan arguments. The reaction inside basketball circles has not always looked anything like the chaos happening online. Plenty of players, coaches, analysts, and people connected to the game have acknowledged that Clark's production gives her a legitimate claim to this roster spot without requiring any special treatment. Her numbers do not need to be defended through popularity. The assists are real. The offensive creation is real. The attention defenses give her is real. The impact she has produced across consecutive seasons is something evaluators can actually watch and measure. That matters because it exposes the real divide in this debate, despite how certain headlines might frame it. This is not broadly a situation where every player in the league is furious that Clark received an opportunity they believe she stole. Much of the strongest resentment is coming from online communities and fan identities that have spent years defining themselves in opposition to the attention surrounding her. Somewhere along the way, Clark's rise stopped being treated as one player's success and became symbolic of a larger battle over whose favorite athletes receive recognition, whose era matters more, and whether the league should embrace the audience she attracted. When people become emotionally invested in that conflict, every new achievement becomes another reason to fight. Her making Team USA is interpreted not as a basketball selection, but as another victory for a side they already dislike. Meanwhile, coaches and players whose careers depend on understanding what actually happens on the court tend to evaluate the situation much more simply. Can she help the team? Has she produced enough to deserve consideration? Does her skill set fit? Those questions lead to a far less dramatic conclusion than the arguments dominating comment sections. The loudest hostility may feel enormous online, but that does not mean it represents the entire locker room or the actual decision-makers responsible for constructing a winning roster.
There was so much controversy. Caitlin should be on this team. Caitlin Clark shouldn't be on this team. You've been a part of it, and then people talk about it's the team, and you mentioned you don't have time to play together. Did Team USA miss the boat in not putting Caitlin Clark on this team?
You know, it's really tough. I think every Olympic cycle, there's a story of a snub, and it is because the talent is so great. Yeah. I could sit here and make an argument for her being on the team, but that would require me to take somebody off. And when I look at this roster, I don't see myself doing that. If Caitlin had made the team and somebody else had gotten snubbed,
right,
and I could have made that argument, I would have looked at the roster and I wouldn't have been able to take anybody off. So that's the challenge of picking the U.S. women's basketball team. That's why we win gold, and that's why I'm hoping to see another one.
None of this means Clark's fan base should be treated as completely innocent. There have absolutely been moments when individuals claiming to support her crossed obvious boundaries. Opposing players have received disgusting personal messages. Referees have been attacked online for making ordinary basketball calls. Even Clark's own teammates have sometimes become targets whenever certain fans decide she did not receive enough touches late in a game or someone missed a pass they believed should have gone her way. That behavior deserves criticism, and pretending it does not exist would weaken the entire argument. Clark herself has repeatedly made clear that she does not support people attacking others in her name, and there is no evidence she wants teammates, opponents, coaches, or officials harassed because of basketball outcomes. But acknowledging that problem still does not justify using it as a roster selection standard. If national teams begin excluding athletes because a percentage of their supporters behave terribly online, the logic quickly becomes impossible to apply consistently. Every globally famous athlete develops extreme fans. Soccer superstars have them. NBA icons have them. NFL quarterbacks have them. Tennis champions have them. The combination of celebrity, tribal fandom, and social media algorithms guarantees that fringe behavior becomes louder and more visible than ever before. That is a cultural problem around modern sports, not something unique to Caitlin Clark. Team USA can address security, establish behavioral standards, condemn harassment, and support players who become targets without pretending those issues determine who deserves to play point guard. These are two different conversations that keep being forced together. One concerns how communities should deal with abusive fan behavior. The other concerns which combination of players gives the United States the strongest chance to win while maximizing the visibility of the women's game internationally. Combining those issues might create a convenient narrative, but it does not create a coherent basketball argument.
The FIBA team got announced today. I don't know if you got a chance to see. Were there any things that surprised you on the list?
You know, keeping it local, you know, Sabrina not being on there, Olivia Miles not being on there, but you know, who you take off?
When there's only 12, it's almost like what happens with All-Star, where it's like, what do we do if you're trying to say somebody else goes on? Who you pulling off? And so that's always just a tough list when you have such deep talent.
100%, and may it stay this difficult for, you know, and I know it will. We all know it will for 100,000 years,
Yep.
right? It should only ever get harder from here forward, as long as, you know, some people don't pull any shenanigans with Title IX and any of that jive. Like we just stay the course, and there, you know, because boy, oh boy, you can't help but look at the bigs on Seattle and be like, well, maybe not tonight, but 2 years from tonight. Goodness me.
There, another country's team, but they'll be there. So return to the original question: is Team USA genuinely stronger without Caitlin Clark? Remove the arguments from social media. Ignore the stan wars, the resentment, the endless quote tweets, and every emotional battle surrounding her name. Look only at basketball value and business impact together, because at the highest level of modern international sports, both factors are part of the reality. Without Clark, the United States would still possess a talented roster anchored by Aja Wilson, arguably the most dominant overall player in the women's game. Around Wilson would be a collection of proven veterans, elite professionals, champions, defenders, scorers, and players capable of winning against anyone. But in terms of pure mainstream recognition and individual gravitational pull, Wilson would shoulder much of that responsibility herself. Add Clark and the structure changes immediately. Now the roster contains another player capable of functioning as an offensive engine, pushing tempo after rebounds, delivering passes through crowded lanes, creating easy baskets for cutters, and punishing defenders who give her even a small amount of space beyond the three-point line. At the same time, the team adds perhaps the strongest attention magnet women's basketball has produced in this generation. Ticket demand rises when she appears. Broadcast conversations change when she plays. Merchandise moves. Casual viewers tune in. People who might not recognize every name on the roster suddenly have a reason to follow the tournament from beginning to end. That combination of competitive value and commercial impact is incredibly rare. Team USA is not being asked to choose between someone who helps them win and someone who helps them sell tickets. Clark can potentially do both at the same time, and that is exactly why excluding her would be far more difficult to justify now than it might have been earlier in her career.
The lineup that I'm most interested in seeing, and I think this actually should be our starting lineup: Caitlin Clark, Napheesa Collier, Asia Wilson, Paige Beckers, and Breanna Stewart. This lineup is roadkill. Oh, roadkill. Overkill. This lineup is disgusting. You got CC with weapons like Fee, Asia, Paige, and this is it. The floor spacing. Napheesa Collier can actually finish around the rim. Stewie, long leg, he can finish. Defensively, funneling your matchup into Asia Wilson, funneling your matchup into Fee, funneling your matchup into Breanna Stewart. This lineup should be utter destruction, and this should be the starting five.
Nothing about that equation suggests Team USA becomes weaker by adding her. On the court, the roster gains another elite creator who can distort defensive spacing and generate opportunities for teammates. Away from the court, the national program gains dramatically more visibility at a moment when women's basketball is still trying to convert historic attention into long-term growth. The argument against her inclusion therefore keeps drifting away from measurable basketball value and toward discomfort with the role she might occupy. Some people simply do not like the possibility that Clark could be the point guard directing possessions, the player featured most heavily in coverage, perhaps even the captain, and unquestionably one of the names placed at the center of the event. But discomfort is not evidence. Caitlin Clark has made Team USA. Everything surrounding the roster suggests she could have a significant role, potentially as the starting point guard, possibly with leadership responsibilities, and almost certainly as the most discussed player heading into the summer competition. The previous time around, she never received the opportunity to experience that stage, and whether people admit it or not, her absence became part of the conversation surrounding the tournament. Now she finally gets the chance to answer every hypothetical on the floor. Maybe she dominates. Maybe she struggles initially. Maybe international defenses create challenges she has not seen before. That uncertainty is part of what makes the story compelling. But after watching the way the last 2 seasons unfolded, one lesson should already be obvious. Every time the basketball world has treated Clark's next challenge as the moment the hype would finally collapse, she has found another way to push the conversation forward. Betting that this opportunity will suddenly be the one she cannot handle has not exactly been a winning strategy for the people who have doubted her so far.